Good morning, my lovelies. How are you today? I hope everybody has had a great week. It's been kind of a crazy, just weather-related week here. We've had some serious rainstorms or whatnot, so it looks like today might be a nice, pretty day, but it's still too cold to go enjoy my pool. At least the water is. The temperature outside will be nice and warm. However, we are back for ID Channel's Evil Lives Here. We are in Season 2, Episode 9, titled Trapped in Hell. This episode originally aired in March 13th, 2007. So, it's really crazy that we have one more episode and then we are in Season 3. We are moving right along. And I'm just going to say this. Today's episode is one of the craziest, strangest that I have seen to date on this Evil Lives Here. So, obviously I've seen all the ones that we have talked about. I have seen others that got my interest before I started talking about this series. And none of them are as crazy as this one. So, that's saying a lot. And I'm quite confused on a lot of what I saw. And I hope I can explain it to you in a manner that makes sense. So bear with me. Hopefully I can circle it all back around, make it all make sense, and go from there. So I like to try to give trigger warnings. And in this one, it's kind of weird. It's kind of hard to. I want to say there is abuse. Okay. And it talks about spousal and child abuse, and my shirt is just like all over the place. But it's really not in great detail. It's mentioned, so if any mention of any kind of abuse bothers you, please step away from this and check me out on my next episode. But my personal opinion is there's mental illness. I am not a doctor, so this is just all kind of what I'm seeing and thinking, so we'll discuss it as we go. But I'm just going to say nowhere does it mention in the episode mental illness at all. I'm the only one that mentions it, because even when I go back and do my internet search, it's not mentioned. So just want to put that out there. So let's buckle up, get ready. There is a lot to unpack in this episode. Okay, so here we go. We start this episode hearing from Susan Hamlin. She is going to be our narrator in the, this happened to her. This is her story. And I don't know why I specified that, because so far in all these episodes, the narrator is telling their story. So that should have been pretty obvious to begin with. But she starts out by saying that she didn't want to do this episode. So she wasn't going to do this episode. She wasn't comfortable doing this episode is probably the best way to say this. She said going through the ordeal was just so emotionally draining. The experience was horrible. And to relive it in any aspect is asking a lot. And I get that. I really do. Anybody that goes on this show and relives their horror, it's got to be hard. It's got to be emotionally draining. It's, the whole thing. So we learned that she was married to her husband for 20 years. So it's been a long ordeal for her. And she spent the majority of that time terrified of him. She's telling us how she met the guy who became her husband. His name's Richard Hamlin, or I might call him Rick, depending on what she's saying at the time. And he was supposed to be her Prince Charming. She said they met while both of them were in law school. And he was just the tall, dark, handsome, man of her dreams. The guy she had grown up wanting all her life. So I found, so they were both in law school, and I found out later a little bit more about this, but at this point, it says that when her and Rick started dating and got married, he convinced her to drop out of law school. And she says he was very, very good at convincing her to drop out, to give it up, to be a wife, to be a mother, and so on and so forth. And you will never hear me say that that's an awful idea. I personally was able to put my career on hold and stay home with my kiddos. It was what I wanted to do. So I'm not ever going to say that's an awful idea. I think each woman, man, whoever has children can make that decision for themselves. So that is completely up to them. However, she kind of made it sound like he persuaded her and talked her into it. You know, he became this big lawyer, and she ended up staying at home. And I don't know, I think eventually it was okay, but I think at first she really didn't want to do that. I think she wanted to pursue her career. Now, I want to say this is all speculation, because nowhere does she say that it was not her choice or not. She just says he was very persuasive. That was a little quote. He was very persuasive, end quote. And to me, that's just, she might eventually have gotten there where she wanted to stay at home with her kids, but I don't think she physically, mentally, at first wanted to do that. So anyways, if you're fortunate enough to be able to stay home, if it's what you want to do, I think, like I said, it's each person's own choice, each person's own discretion. So I'll never complain about that. However, like I said, I feel like he persuaded her. And she made it a very, she made a point to say very persuasive. Makes me wonder if this was, and it was, but this was the first sign of things to come for them. But 2020 being hindsight, she can look at it now and say, yeah, I should have seen that. She didn't at the time. How many of us actually see us being manipulated until after the fact, right? I mean, sometimes we don't even realize it, but most of the time we don't realize it at first. Anyways, I went on a tangent there. I'm sorry. But yeah, I feel like that should have been that is a sign of things to come. And we'll just go from there. So Susan says Richard got a job at the DA's office. So he pursued his career. He got what he wanted. And again, I'm okay with that. He was successful and made a name for himself, and she became the stay-at-home mom. So she said, and I'll have more info about this at the end, but they lived in an affluent neighborhood, went to church, did the correct social things, and looked like a normal family. But they were anything but normal. Okay, so this is where I find it gets weird. I may struggle doing my makeup while I talk about this because it is so... Maybe it's just me. I am so curious to hear your thoughts after this. And when this happened, this is where I thought maybe there was some kind of mental illness. So Susan starts off talking about her father, and they were very close and had a great relationship. And she said even after she got married, she always went to her father for opinions on things, and Richard hated this. Okay. And Richard could not understand the closeness that Susan had with her father. So, for example, he hugged Susan. Her father hugged his daughter. And Rick was saying that's not normal, that dads don't hug their daughters. which I find very, very sad considering he has two daughters of his own, which will come into play here. But in another instance, Susan's taking a picture with her father, and her father puts his arm around her. Just one of those, they're standing together, he puts his arm up. And Richard's like, that is inappropriate. There is something wrong. You need to stop this behavior immediately. And then he would say, what is wrong with you that you think it's okay that your father hugs you? It gets more confusing. So, like I said, he was convinced dads don't hug their daughters. They don't put their arms around their daughters. If they did, there was something wrong, and he couldn't understand why she didn't see it. So, she said, yeah, he kind of made her start questioning if it was wrong that her dad hugged her or whatever, but it's just always been how they are. And she said it was nothing. It was just a hug. So Rick was convinced that Susan had been molested as a child because her dad hugged her and put his arm around her. So, of everything I've seen in this show, you get to kind of start to expect a lot of crazy things. But that one completely blew me away. I was not prepared for him to come up and say, you were molested as a child because your father hugged you. And I don't know. But Rick was seeing things. Susan said none of it was true. I'm just going to state that right now because this does become a huge topic in this show. Susan says it is not true. She was never molested as a child by her father or by anyone. So, but Rick was convinced. And then it does get crazier after this. Susan proceeds to tell us that Rick had an insatiable sex drive, I guess you can call it. He wanted sex every day, multiple times a day, and she never had a say in the matter. Like, she could never say she wasn't in the mood, she wasn't feeling well. It's her monthly. None of that. He didn't care. She was to do what he said. He told her he didn't want to come. He didn't want to come home to a, quote, soccer mom. He wanted to come home to a wife, end quote. He wanted her to dress in negligees and, in her own words, quote, slutty outfits, end quotes. She said all he wanted her to do is stay in bed and have sex all the time. And if she didn't want it, there was something wrong with her. So he saw that her job was to do nothing but please him sexually. And this is where it gets even weirder, because Richard was convinced that since she was molested as a child, that's why she was sexually repressed, or prudish, as she said, and didn't want to have sex all the time. So when she would tell him that she was never abused or sexually molested, it made Rick extremely mad. So I don't know. I don't know how you go multiple years in the marriage and then all of a sudden he is saying she's been molested. But let's continue. It doesn't get better. So then, because he was convinced that she was sexually assaulted, he started doing these sessions with her. And he called them, quote, memory-getting sessions, end quote. She said he would keep her in the room for hours, just grilling her and drilling her and trying to get her to confess that she was molested. Not only confess, he wanted her to tell him, yes, he was. She was. She never would. So he would get her pictures, her childhood pictures out and say, look here, look at this picture. He's got look at how he's touching you inappropriately. And the picture showed that she was young, sitting on her dad's lap, and he was reading a book. So, he's got the book here, he's got his arm around his child, and both of them are looking down at the book. And he's convinced that it was inappropriate and he was touching her inappropriately. I'm going to tell you, I just don't even know what to think about this, to be honest. And then, what I find hilarious is he pulls out pictures of her and a group of friends that they were having a sleepover at Susan's house. And Richard was convinced because he took pictures of her and the girls at this sleepover and pictures of them sleeping that he had molested her. Now, come on. I'm a mother. I have a young daughter, and she's had sleepovers, and I have taken videos and pictures and all kinds of stuff. I've done the exact thing that he is claiming is abuse. I just didn't even know what to think about that because it's like so completely out of there. So he was convinced she was molested by her father, and his goal was to get her to admit to it. And if she didn't, he would become so enraged. He had weapons that he would pull out and threaten her with. He had like a sword, some knives, a gun. And she says, quote, "He used them to control me before he ever hit me," end quote. Now, did she know this at the time? Who knows? But that says a lot because, I mean, maybe she just realized it looking back, but he was controlling her and trying to get her to do what he wanted, and not just with this lawsuit that is just crazy, but in many aspects of their life, he controlled everything she did, and he used the weapons to do so. I'm going to say it never says if he uses in the episode. It never says if he uses the weapons on her. When I looked this up and I think I saw something that we will discuss later. So, because this isn't, like I said, this is the craziest episode I have ever seen, and it just gets crazier. So remember, Rick is a lawyer, right? In a strange twist that I literally didn't know if I should laugh or seriously just go, WTF, Rick was determined to get Susan to admit that she had been molested or abused, and he needed to get a revenge on her father. So he decided to file a lawsuit against her. This was I'm telling you, this is just so much out there. He filed a lawsuit against her father for, quote, being deprived of a wife with a healthy sex appetite, end quote. Because she'd been molested, it ruined her sex drive. That's why she wasn't giving in to his every need and desire and want. And I think my jaw hit the floor. I mean, I was like, I couldn't even believe what I was hearing was real. And to top it off, he was suing his father-in-law for $1 million. Yeah. So Susan said he worked tirelessly on this lawsuit. And, of course, he included her in everything. He wanted to get everything together, and it became a full-time thing for him, this lawsuit. So he went through letters and photos and books, whatever he needed to pursue this, to be able to sue his father-in-law. Susan said while he was doing this, he literally got crazier and crazier, like his mental health. And he wanted her to give him ammunition to use against her father in this lawsuit. So she said, he would grill her for hours upon hours. And just really, it was very abusive in nature. And but she said she was never molested by her father, so she would not make up lies for him to use against her father. And when she refused to make up lies, he became violent. So she said the first time he abused her, he punched her in the stomach. And I'm not going to get into that whole story. It was pretty graphic. She thought he was going to kill her. It's how bad he beat her. And it kind of became a normal thing after the first episode. Yeah, but I don't like talking about it. I don't really want to hear it, so I'm not even going to go into details. But he began abusing her. And she said the first time she was just so shocked. Like, she had seen his violent side. She had seen him with guns and weapons threatening with her. But she didn't expect him to hit her. So, at this point, you know how I told you multiple times that the ID channel shows us actual video or pictures or whatever. And we start seeing actual pictures of her. So there's one you can see she has he dislocated her jaw once, and you see her face. And then I'm looking at these pictures. He dislocated her jaw. She was beaten and bruised. These are multiple different pictures, so it's not just one time. He broke her ribs, and knowing he did so, he continued to hit her in that same spot. And there's pictures bruised and battered in her abdomen area. And here's my thought. Here's my question. Who took these pictures? Did she go to the hospital? Is that how they were taken? Were there reports filed? Where was the police? I mean, in all of this, nothing is mentioned about it. But she has pictures. There's photographic evidence, right? So somebody was aware. But she said, I take that back. I've wrote down, it is never mentioned about what I just asked. Where's the cops? Who took these pictures? Was it recorded? Did she go to the hospital? Blah, blah. It is never even mentioned any more about this lawsuit, other than how tiresome he worked and what he did. He tried to get her to confess to something that didn't happen. It never tells us if he actually took his father-in-law to court and the outcome. So I'm really hoping I find this information, and I'm going to tell you no, I don't. There's a little bit more I could tell you, but no, I never find out. So here's where I am convinced that Richard may be paranoid schizophrenic. I mean, again, I just want to say, I am not a doctor. I don't know anything more than probably the rest of us on paranoia, schizophrenia, but I'm watching this episode thinking there's got to be something wrong. I mean, his delusions are getting out of hand, and we will talk about that. His delusions completely start... I don't even know what to say. It's like what happens coming up is just so far-fetched that there's something going on. Now, I find out what possibly could be the issue here, but it's never completely... There's nothing else mentioned in the episode, nothing about mental health, nothing else that explains why he completely went off the rocker. But when I do some research, I find out. But you're going to see this delusions only get worse. And as a bystander, just watching this, my first thought was, he is schizophrenic, you know? And then I wondered, did he ever get checked for mental issues? Again, that's just me. So now we learn he is also abusive to his kids. Okay, so we find out that the father's been abusing the kids. And Susan tells us the story of one time Rick had called and was pissed, mad, crazy, whatever. And she's like, she did not want to be there when he come home. She didn't want the kids to be there when he come home. So she gathers all the kids up, and she's decided they're going to make a break for it, right? So there's 4 kids. I will get into more of this here in a bit, but there are 4 kids. And 3 of them, the younger of them, run to the car. They know. So the oldest, this tells you how long she's been living with this abuse, was 16. So he refused to go. He is like, Dad's going to be mad if we're not home. I'm not leaving. I'm not doing that. Whatever. She says she felt she had to go ahead and leave. And even if it meant leaving him, because she had to protect her kids, right? So she took them to a hotel, and they had planned on staying there, and she was going to try to figure out what to do. She said she couldn't do it. She couldn't leave her son. So she ended up going back home, taking the kids back. So she paid for a hotel room. She didn't stay. And she said she gets home, and it's a couple hours later. It's late or, whatever. And Rick never even came home. So it doesn't explain if that's something he did often or what. But yeah, he never even came home. So she freaked out and showed her son that she would leave him for nothing. That's hard. That's just hard. I can't say I agree or disagree. It's just, I know that is hard. So anyways, she said she felt trapped. She had her kids and she didn't want to leave them. She had no money. He had isolated her so much she had no money. She couldn't go to her family because I guess she could have, but she had isolated her from her father. It never mentions the mother, so I'm guessing the father was either widowed or single or something, but mother was never mentioned. So she doesn't go back to him, and she stayed. So, because I keep putting in here, in another really weird turn of events, and I'm like, you know what? There's no need for me to even say that because we are past that. At this point, everything that happens is considered weird. So, we find a few things out at once. Number 1, Richard was convinced his father-in-law was in charge of a satanic cult and was out to kill him. Dude had a serious problem with his father-in-law. I don't even know what else to say. He had some kind of something with his father-in-law. 2, we find that he is now starting to turn the kids against their mother in his bid to isolate Susan and keep her to himself and whatever. He is now turning the kids against the mother, saying that she was part of this cult that her father led, that she was possessed by a demon, and he would literally beat Susan in front of the kids and say, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to beat the demon out of her. And Susan said the kids never said a word. They never made any kind of motion or whatever. They just sat and watched her get beat. I don't know what to do with that. So, and 3rd, we find out that he took Susan out one night with the boys. And they were in the car, and the boys were in the back seat. And he gave them paint guns. And that's a very close range to be shooting paint guns. They're in the back seat, she's right in the front. And Dad told them that if she moved, that they were to shoot her. So he took her out to a field, and he was going to execute her. He asked the boys, said, what do we do with her? I think we just kill her. And it never says what the boys say. And I'm praying that they didn't agree to kill their mother, but it's never mentioned what they said. Now, we do meet the boys, and I'll get into that in a minute, but one of them, the youngest of the two boys, 2 girls in this family, and the oldest boy was not in this video or episode, and I do find out why. But the youngest son says he knew that something wasn't right, that there was, I don't know how old he was. He looked teenager. He wasn't 16 like his brother, but I would think 13, 14. But he knew that this was not right, that this wasn't how things were supposed to be, and he knew his life was completely a mess. So, yeah. So we took her out in the field. He had his gun, his trusty gun. He doesn't go anywhere without. And he had her get on her knees and literally was doing the execution style in front of the boys. Had the gun on her and decided not to do it. Said that he still had use for her, and he didn't kill her. Which, thank God, like I said, the boys were there. I mean, come on. But at the same time, how terrifying would that be? You're taken out in the middle of nowhere in an open field, and you've got a gun to your head, execution style, and you think this is it. And you know your boys are watching. You know that he asked them what he should do, and yeah, you think that's it. It's over. But he decided not to execute her that night. So, if all that wasn't enough, we now hear from the kids. And like I said, there's 2 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. It mentions the oldest one at being 16 during all this. I don't really know how the others were, and I don't know the age ranges. So, I purposely did not, this is almost empty. I purposely did not look into much about their life. They deserve their peace after what they were put through. So, we do hear from 2 girls and a son. Like I said, the other one's not there. We'll talk about that in a minute. And okay. So all of them say that they believe their father. That when he told them that their mom was possessed by the devil and that he was trying to save them, and that's why he was beating her, they believed him. And they believed she was complete evil because their father wouldn't lie to them. They were so enthralled by their father. They believed everything he said and didn't think that he would lie to them. They believed all of it, that she was possessed by a demon, that she was in the cult. One of the girls even said that the first time she prayed in her life was when Dad told them that mom was possessed by the devil, and she prayed to God to help her mom get rid of the devil and save her. But the other girl was so convinced, she told her sister that her mom couldn't be saved. So, and the one sister looks really young even now. I don't really know how old they are, like I said, but she looks very young. And the kids, they're separate, so they're each separately talking to the camera, and they all said they 100% believed their dad and thought that, or the one girl, not both girls, because the one girl was praying to God to save her mom. The other girl and the son, as older adults, said that they 100% believed their dad and that he would never lie to them, and if he said that mom was possessed by the devil, then mom was possessed by the devil. Oh, okay. Isn't that weird, though? I mean, how do we go from suing your father-in-law because he, in your opinion, sexually abused his daughter, and that's why you don't have a wife that has a healthy sex drive, to now the father-in-law is out to get him and is the leader of a cult. See what I'm saying? The delusions this guy's having are just pretty bad, and they're not getting better. They just keep getting worse. And an example of this getting worse, and I don't understand this. This is another one of those, I got makeup on my, another one of those situations. I'm like, okay, what happened? Where's the police report? Why was this not, let me tell you what happened. So one day, Susan said there was some Jehovah's Witnesses walking around the neighborhood, as they are tend to do, and stopped at her house and, wanted to talk about Jehovah, and gave her some paperwork. And then, Susan said, I told them no thank you, I wasn't interested, and to have a great day. And then here comes Richard. He is running down the stairway of their house, and he's got his gun out. He's like waving it around. Who was that? Who was that? And, Susan's like, I don't know who they were. I don't know who they were. So she says he ran out of the house, and he was going to go chase them down. Now, this was two women that came by to talk about their religion. He was now chasing them out the door and convinced that they were there to kill him. So he was going to get them first. So he took his gun, he ran, whatever. And Susan says, next thing I know, I hear a gunshot. And he comes back in and he's telling her, I shot myself. The gun went off, whatever. I shot myself. And I'm just like, he shot himself in the leg. I mean, I know during this whole episode, my mouth was probably hanging on the ground, but during this, I was just like, what? So, dude shot himself. But when the kids come running, he proceeds to change his story that he had told Susan and say that they shot him, that they had came to kill him, that this was the result of Susan's dad's cult. They were there to kill him. And then she says they went to the hospital and got him fixed back up, and nothing else was said. And I've got to say, do what? Again, do what? Because gunshots, wounds in the hospital tend to draw cop attention, right? I mean, even self-afflicted as he did, or if he's telling them that he's being chased by a cult, would draw some kind of attention, right? Am I the only one that just really sees this as what the Holy Mother of God is going on? Because it doesn't make sense. But it's all it's mentioned. She says when he gets back from the hospital, he's paranoid at his highest, and he tells the kids they are preparing for war. He starts boarding up the windows. He gets all his guns out. He's barricaded them. And he's continuously looking outside, watching for these guys to come attack him. I just don't know. I don't. So at this point too, Richard starts locking Susan in her room. She's not allowed to be around the kids. They are not allowed to talk to her. It is, it's what Richard is like, trying to control everything she does and says, and has no influence on her kids. And she wasn't even allowed out of her room. And so the kids didn't get to talk to her. The kids never saw her. And of course, that just separates them all even more, right? Yeah. So, for the coup de grace, I probably said that wrong. But just to top off everything, because at this point, you're probably thinking this story is crazy. How's it going to get any crazier? It does. So Richard is convinced that not only is, probably put on too much highlighter, but let's just glow up a little bit. Susan a part of her dad's cult, and they're out to get him, but she also abuses her children. And she needs to go to the police, the local police, and admit to everything. Yeah. So, he's decided that she needs to go to the police and confess she's been in a satanic cult and is trying to kill him, and that she has abused their children sexually. So, okay, you know, Susan's been in this marriage a long time, and through all this, she's just been abused and beat down, and her kids are also, you know, part of it. And she thought, she was so worn down, so just done. She thought that if she admitted this, she would be able to escape him, even if it meant going to jail. But, you know, and she says, and I chuckled at this point, she says, and I quote, "It wasn't a great plan," end quote, but it was really all she had. She just didn't know what to do and how to get away from him. I mean, she couldn't even think about trying to save her kids until she could get herself, right? And she thought she'd go to jail. She would just admit to everything he is saying and go to jail. So he takes her to the police station, where he's telling them this cock-a-bull story about the father-in-law being in part of a cult and trying to kill him. And then he's like, yeah, and Susan admit to it, she'll tell you. And she did. So yeah, so she admits to everything that Richard wants her to admit to, just to try to get put into jail. But then the cops make this statement, well, we need to check into this. So she sends her home with him. And she thought he was going to kill her, because during her confession, which the cop made Richard leave so she can confess, right? So during her confession, they also made arrangements and had the kids picked up and moved, because they knew whatever was going on was not safe for the kids. So they got them out of the house. So now she's going back home with Richard, who is pissed that his kids have been taken away from him. And she is convinced he is going to kill her. Now, we see videos. We saw a video of the confession she was making to the cops. And we see video of the kids talking to the welfare people. So apparently, while Susan and Richard were telling this cock-a-bull story, they were talking to the kids. So we're seeing video of the welfare workers talking to the kids. And even though it wasn't likely that the kids came in and started confessing, because they 100% believed what their dad had told them, you start seeing that when they start hearing that, you know, their mom's not part of a cult, she's not possessed. And I don't know, okay, this was really confusing to me, because she had been in there and confessed to being part of the cult. Probably didn't confess so much to being possessed by a demon, but she confessed to being part of this cult, and it was, you know, doing these awful things to their kids, and the police didn't believe her. I really never figured out. It talks a little bit more about it later when I do my research, but to me at this moment I was very confused, because it's saying, you know, the welfare people are telling these kids that that's not true, that their mom wasn't, that their dad had been abusing them, and blah blah blah, and it wasn't normal. That what their dad was doing was not normal. Most households don't do this. And it didn't take long before the kids started talking. because they started realizing that they were being lied to. So you can see the kids telling this worker that this, and these different things, right? And the welfare worker was like, okay, did you see this, or did your dad tell you this? Because part of it, you can see the kids saying, yeah, she was abusive to me. And they're like, okay, did she actually abuse you? Did she physically do it, or did your dad tell you she did? And they would all say, well, Dad told us. They never actually saw any of it. So, I'm going to kind of skip back and forth because my notes are not in a good order, I don't think. Susan said that she was convinced that when they got home, the police were from the police station, Rick was going to kill her because, for one, they took her kids and she didn't get arrested, so she was scared to death. But Rick decided, hell, kids are gone, let's have a party. And he told her to go put on one of her, quote, slutty dresses, end quote. And they were going to fix some drink, put some music on, dance, and have a good time. Susan said she was having a lot of trouble having fun. I mean, she just has gone through hell. Her kids are at a foster place or wherever. And she was having trouble convincing him she was having fun. So, again, all this happened pretty quickly because she said, we left the police station, we went home, he wanted to party it up, and she was trying to do what he wanted, and then eventually he's arrested. So the police show up and arrest him. So, like I said, it happened pretty quickly. They must not have believed Susan from the beginning, and with the welfare workers telling them or finding out what they find, from the kids, he's arrested. And it's the only way it makes sense in this episode. So now I want to skip back to my other notes, and let's see. I don't know how they got from A to Z, from she confessed to she was lying and telling the kids. And one of the daughters is talking and telling us that she grew up thinking her mother was the bad guy and instead finds out it was her father. And we hear from the son who said at that moment, when they're telling him this is not normal, that, her mom's not part of a cult, there is no cult, blah, 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 he realized he'd been lied to. And then he said the shame for the fact they believed him and how they treated their mother. He said it was embarrassing to think about what they did to her, and he still lives with that. So I kind of skipped back through my notes. Let's go. So Rick was arrested on February 28th, 2004. And this is the first time we've heard a timeline. So I'll check that out. But I'm not really sure I got much of a timeline. I just know it was early 2000s. Most of the time on these stories, they don't give us the facts. Like, we still don't know where they're at in the timeline, but a lot of times we don't get it until I look it up. So now there's video footage of Rick in the interrogation room with the cops, and he is still telling his crazy story about his father-in-law being in a satanic cult, about how they were trying to kill him, and he never backs down from this. So even the cops says, there are a lot of people terrified of you, talking about his kids and his wife, and he was just like, no, I'm the one. It's always him. He was the one that was being hunted and threatened to kill. He was just protecting him and his family. He struggled with the fact that he was being abused or being arrested for spousal abuse. Just couldn't understand why he was being abused or arrested. He didn't abuse his wife. He was protecting himself. So, sorry about that. So it shows one of the daughters watching the interrogation, and I purposely not mentioned their names. I know them, they show them, I'm not mentioning them. But she says, watching the interrogation, that he was delusional and crazy. And the second daughter says that she was so relieved he was finally arrested, and said that he was evil. So, again, I'm struggling with this because they said he was evil and he's delusional, and they were terrified of him growing up, but yet they believed everything out of his mouth. And it might have been a pure reaction to them being scared of him. I'm not sure. So Richard was convicted and received a life sentence for torturing his wife and children. Susan says after they arrested him, her only goal, was to get her family back, who was still in foster care. She needed to pick up the pieces, put their life back together. She couldn't dwell on what had been done to her because her kids were the most important thing. I feel that. I get that. I respected her. But she was nervous. So when they came back home, she didn't know how they were going to react because, for one, they have been isolated from their mother. They've been told all these numerous lies. They were not very kind to their mother. But now, she said it was going to be rough, but she was going to have to build this bridge and put them all back together. But she said when they came home, they all ran up to her, started giving her hugs, telling her they loved her, they were so sorry, and that they wanted to come home. They missed her, whatever. And Susan's like, it was the best moment of my life. So she said it was the rebuilding. That's when they knew they had to rebuild and start over. So she says that she needed to talk to her father after all said and done because she had been isolated from him, and as close as they were, she hadn't been able to go see him and talk to him and apologize. She said, I felt like I had to apologize. My husband was crazy, and accusing him of all these awful things. So she said they did get together. They talked about it one time. She said she apologized for everything, and after that, they never spoke of it again because he wanted to put it all behind him. He didn't want to have to deal with it anymore. It was in the past. They were moving forward. So Susan says that she is so happy to be alive, and she never thought she would be. She literally never thought she'd make it out of that marriage. She says, quote, so many people think that once you remove the abuser from the situation, now the family is good to go, and that all the problems are over, and that life is good again. But it's very difficult to get back on your feet, end quote. That has to be probably the truest statement of this. Just because now Rick was in jail, she had to start over. She had to, try to rebuild her life with her kids. And believe me, when I tell you more about it, it's not as easy as it sounds because we'll just talk about that in a minute. So her son comes back on and says that this whole thing was always going to be with him. He said, quote, my dad got up every day and made a conscious choice to torture his wife every day, to beat the crap out of his kids, and to put the family in constant state of fear, end quote. That's a heck of a way of looking at it. Dude got up every day to do just those things. So the episode ends with the daughters talking and saying, quote, the fact that they survived is amazing. The fact that they survived each day after he has been gone is even more amazing because we choose to be stronger than what he has done to us. And we choose not to be victims, but to be survivors. That we can break the cycle and show our future generation a better life than we had, end quote. That was the perfect way to end this episode. It really was. However, we ain't done yet. So we're going to look on the internet and find out a little bit more. And it's really not as much as I thought there would be. So I am on the religionnewsblog.com. Now, to me, it's kind of weird that that's the website it's on, but that's where we're at. The title of the article was Richard Hamlin Gets Life in Prison. And the article was from September 2006. So it says, I quote, judge says the former prosecutor inspired by pure evil, end quote. The article says that Rick was a Sacramento prosecutor and defense attorney. So now we know where they are. They're in California, Sacramento. The family testified against him in court, saying they feared him, loathed him, and have disowned him. The abuse of his wife started June 2003 and ended in his arrest 2004. So if it started in 2003 and their son was 16, there's a big gap here. What caused it? Again, I'm thinking mental illness. He has, I don't know how it works. Do you develop it? It's not a code. You can't just catch it. It had to have been developed. But from this article, there was a very short time of being abused. And I thought it was through the whole marriage. So the article talks a lot about the same situations that we saw in the episode. You know, the wife being the wife being beaten, the boys holding the paint gun against their mom in the car, and they talk about the lawsuit. But I find interesting is apparently Rick was working at a $700,000 a year law firm, lived in $1 million house, and all of a sudden had to file bankruptcy, and their house was going into foreclosure. So the article tells us that his plan was to sue his father-in-law for the $1 million because he was broke, which is not mentioned previously. And it says Richard represented himself in the 3-month lawsuit. So it says that, and it made me think that he represented himself against his father-in-law, but then it says it again later, and I'm like, okay, maybe he represented himself in his suit that he was being charged against. It never specified, and it never tells us the outcome, or if it actually did he do this for 3 months. I'm so confused. I don't know. Did it go to court or did it not? It never really tells me. So the next article I clicked on is titled Evil Lives Here, Examines Case of Susan and Richard Hamlin with Satanic Cult Claims and Spousal Torture. I cannot talk today. The website is monstersandcritics.com, and it was posted in March of 2017, so it would have been after or about the same time as the Evil Lives Here episode. So I'm not sure if I find anything new on this site because, like I said, it's based on the Evil Lives Here. But I find out that Susan was 49 at the time of the episode, and Richard was 45, so he was a little younger. Susan had graduated from law school, top of her class. So that's the first time I hear that she actually graduated, because before it made me think she dropped out to be a wife and mother. So she does have a degree and she is a lawyer. In the article it says that Susan claims that Richard was a man of, quote, excess with an insatiable appetite for sex, drugs, and alcohol, end quote. This is the first time that drugs and alcohol are mentioned, and I'm thinking, okay, so maybe it's not a sudden case of a mental illness that he has developed, caught, found, I don't know. Maybe it's drugs. And that tends to start making a little bit more sense why, especially if it was this short period of time from 2003 to 2004, it was all drug related. But it makes sense now. It makes a little bit more sense because, like I said, I was thinking his delusions were paranoid, schizophrenia, but maybe it's just drugs. And it could be. It doesn't say what he took, what he did, how he did it. It just says he had an excess of alcohol and drugs. Okay, so now it says the police were suspicious of Susan's confession when she went in. They knew her to be a lawyer and knew that what the ramifications would be if she did so if she did confess to all this. So they're thinking there's a reason. There's something going on that she all of a sudden started wanting to confess to something and go to jail. So the article says that Susan did admit during the confession that Richard made her do it, which is very confusing. And the officers immediately took action. But that's not in the episode, and that's literally all it says. So here again it says Richard represented himself in court. So I'm thinking not the lawsuit against the father, but the court where he has been he's being tried for the spousal and child abuse. But even though he represented himself and he was a defense attorney, he went from the district attorney's office to opening his own business as a defense lawyer. He was still found guilty. And okay, so this article tells us that Susan wrote a book in 2013 titled A Guide for Family and Friends of Someone Living in Domestic Abuse or Domestic Violence. I apologize. I don't know much about the book. Didn't know there was a book. Not necessarily something I want to read. Apparently she does a lot of volunteering too for domestic abuse and so on and so forth. So good for her. Really good for her. So it says here, Richard was denied parole in 2011 and will spend another 10 years in prison for his next parole opportunity. So that would have been 2021. I read that his children speak against him getting paroled every year. And I looked specifically 2021 Pro for Richard Hamlin. Did he get it? Did he not? I can't find anything. I couldn't find anything. I'm looking in the wrong spots apparently, but I could not find anything, and I have to assume he's still in jail. I don't know. There's really nothing else to do online, which is very confusing. It was very, I guess because it was within the family and there was no other outside victims, there just isn't a lot of other information. I am left with two questions. The one being, what happened to the lawsuit against the father? What happened to it? Did it just disappear? Did he give up on it? Did he actually go through with it? I would think if he went through with it and won $1 million, they would have told us. But I don't know. And then about his current parole. I would love to know what the current parole status is. I don't see it. I just don't. So I did see that the eldest son was in the military, and that's why he was not on this episode. So it wasn't that he hated his mom and never wanted to speak about it, but he was active. He was actively deployed. But he did come back in 2011 which is kind of odd in the whole, he was able to come back in 2011 to speak against his father's parole, but could not be in the episode that was filmed 2017. So, the very strange, this is the very odd and strange story of Richard Hamlin and the torture and abuse he reflected on his family. I would love to know your thoughts. This one was so crazy and all over the place, and I tried my best not to. I tried my best to tell you the story in some kind of great order that made sense. I probably failed. That's on me, and if so, I'm very sorry. But I would love to hear your thoughts. So, it was a shit show. That's all I can say. It was, yeah. So let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share if you so choose, but please hit that subscribe button, guys. I love having my subscribers. And I am building this, and I'm hoping to build it. So, thank you for joining. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, be careful, and until next time, goodbye.